Everyone is a star child, made of stardust and the infinite potential of the universe. This extraordinary fearless something in each of us clamors for freedom from the bonds of fear, conformity, and an ordinary life. Welcome to Dr. Durr's Living in the Sweet Spot, where practical tools and solutions from the intersection of mind-body medicine, science, and spiritual well-being awaken and empower you to live out your infinite potential, to live life in the sweet spot. Approximately 115,000 people are on the wait list for organ transplants nationwide. In today's episode, we are going to delve into the complex landscape of organ donation, exploring both the profound impact it has on saving lives and the hurdles faced in its implementations. We're also going to talk about the struggles, the triumphs, the ethical considerations surrounding the donation process, shedding light on the critical need for awareness, infrastructure, support to overcome obstacles, the fairness involved in the process, and all of this to ensure a brighter future for transplant recipients. And joining me today as my guest is Jack Lynch. Hey there.
Good afternoon, doctor. How are you been?
I'm doing very well, and I'm so glad to have you on here, my friend, so we can have, again, this conversation. I know it's something that a lot of folks I don't think really know much about, but, obviously when I said to you, I said, you and I were having the conversation about this process and about some of your concerns. And I raised the fact with you. I said, you know what? I said, it's really concerning to me when I look around and I see, all of these kidney dialysis places popping up.
Yes.
Especially in our community. And I said, you know what? I said, so let's take this conversation to the platform.
Yes. The question, if I may expand on that, is that 20 plus years ago, when the economy was really kind of plummeting, if you notice, the dialysis centers were being built. Notwithstanding a terrible economy, they were taking every corner. The dialysis companies were building on virtually every corner, and then a pharmacy from several of the big names was on the other company. And I'm not talking about renovating property. From the ground up, they were building these facilities. They knew during those hard times, those who are impacted the most are going to continue to plummet, healthcare-wise.
Wow. So, so that explains what I was observing, at least from the aspect of what you were saying about building them from the ground up. Because you're right. You see these new buildings just kind of sprout up.
Yes.
In these locations. So you're absolutely correct that the fact that these were not properties that they were renovating, but again, they were properties that, that they were building ground up.
Yes.
So you know what, actually, but before we get into this any further, actually what I want to do is, share your illustrious background. So, and again, so the audience has an idea of just how amazing you are.
You're kind. So born and raised here in Chicagoland, educated initially in the public school system, the junior college system, then Chicago State University. And then I attended Meharry Medical College, where I was participant in the Master Med program.
So what's the Mass Med program?
It's the Master Med.
Oh, Master Med. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, and then from there, well, I tell you what, we gonna go to the end and then come on back to that, because at this point, you are a retired senior advisor for the Gift of Hope Organ and Tissue Donor Network.
That's correct.
Yeah. So, and in this role, well, before you retired as a senior advisor, you strengthened relationships with leaders in the communities throughout the Gift of Hope Organ and Tissue Donor Network service area. And then you also led the efforts on the development of the Gift of Hope training centers on the Chicago South Side. Prior to being the senior advisor, you served as the director of community affairs. And in this role, you were responsible for developing and maintaining communications that promote organ and tissue donation within the selected community group.
Sure. So all of that is to say that the path that they were willing to quote unquote sponsor me at, I didn't go down any of those routes. Transplantation really got its legs in the early 80s, about 1980, 85, somewhere in that neighborhood, because of a Renaissance drug that had been produced that finally was going to keep the body from rejecting an organ transplanted into it. So when that drug came online, it really got everything started. And that's about 1986, 1985. It was during that same time that I was a specialty rep for that pharmaceutical firm that produced that drug, came up with it. And I was training here in the Illinois area at some of the major teaching hospitals. I was conducting the clinical trials that were being done to determine the efficacy from a patient standpoint so that that drug could get FDA approval. And that was my introduction to this issue. But what I came to find, without going into all the details through the years, is that when it came to minority communities and populations, folks who shouldn't have been making decisions were making decisions about us without us. And for what it's worth, their desire to really implicate or to start usable programs that were going to, one, educate and solicit the interests of the Black and brown community. As far as I was concerned, what they were thinking was simply window dressing. They were doomed to fail so that the establishment, in my opinion, could go back and say, see, we tried this. We went to churches. We did this. I just saw that what they were willing to do was a setup for failure. And in a couple of years, they were going to be able to come back and say, let's just continue to ignore them. I didn't accept that, and I went a different route.
So what was the route you took?
So the route I took was what was missing from the presentations that I heard. And let me tell you how I actually got started. As I said, I was conducting the clinical trials for this major pharmaceutical firm at the teaching institutions here in Chicago. And one of the chairmen at a very prestigious program here in Chicago, of the transplant program there at that hospital, he did an article in the Chicago Tribune.
Mm-hmm.
It was in the Sunday edition on page 2. And if you know anything about Chicago and the Chicago Tribune, a very robust, a very elongated newspaper. And he wrote an article about medicine is going to change. We're now going to be able to aid patients who are in heart failure, liver failure, kidney failure. We're going to be able to transplant and not have the body reject the organs that were transplanted. And he indicated something that really caught my attention. And he talked about the fact that the real problem is that the organs have to come from a specific type of dead person, a brain dead person. And those organs have to be perfused and then recovered and quickly placed into a recipient. And it was the understanding of many programs that the more similarity there was, the less possibility of rejecting the organ. So it was believed, because of striated tissue, that the kidneys that are donated and go into like individuals of the same ethnicity at least had a lesser chance of being rejected. And the fact that Black and brown individuals, unfortunately, are more susceptible to high blood pressure, having that issue not addressed in the volume that it needs to be addressed. So their high blood pressure, which is a silent killer of our bodies, in many cases was not being managed as well as it could be managed. And then consequently, those patients had a higher opportunity, unfortunately, to end up in organ failure, starting obviously with the pancreas and on to the kidneys, and then thereafter the liver and the heart. And unfortunately, those numbers if we just look at Illinois, where African Americans constitute approximately 17% of the population, yet then and now, Blacks represent better than 50% of the patients waiting for kidneys. If we follow the logic of the early 80s, that kidneys should be placed in someone from similar ethnicities, well, Blacks were going to continue to be the losers because there were so few African American donors. So in my opinion, the scenario that was painted was set up so that they could say, well, we did try, nothing came of it. We informed the Black community that they would be helping themselves if in fact more Blacks donated. Well, it's not just that simple. We carry a ton of bags. It's hard, you would be hard pressed to find a Black person that doesn't know about unsolicited things being done to volumes of Blacks, i.e. the Tuskegee study and other experimental things that were being done. So just to walk up to a family that looks like me and say, I'm so sorry your loved one is dead, but on the other hand, he could save somebody else. Why don't you let us have consent? Well, good luck at that.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that as a result of, in some sense, taking the accepted norm on. It was not my job. It was not what I was trained to do or being paid to do. Mm-hmm. I was there to conduct a clinical trial, but I wanted to get a stronger understanding why there were so few Black and brown organ donors. What was the linchpin that keeps that from happening? I already talked about the fact that I don't think that the playing field would ever be level. So I'm not crazy, but I thought we could level the playing field by including the community and taking the message to them and bringing the solution from them. And I think over the course of the last 30 some odd years, not only have we done it, but we've done it in a robust, non-argumental fashion. And I'm grateful that we've been used to say, what is this all about? You already saying what we won't do, and you never asked us. We weren't in the room when you were devising the protocols. So I put us in the room, locally and nationally. And what I'm so proud to say is that around the country, there are 53 agencies that are organ procurement agencies, like the one here in Illinois. I've trained individuals to do what I do in almost half of those agencies. And if you look over the last 15 to 18 years, if you look at from an ethnic standpoint, where has donation rates increased? I'm proud to say it's in the Black community, and I've had something to do with that.
Well, you know what? So here's the thing. I think, of course, that you were being extremely modest because because of the fact of the matter is, I think fundamentally you are the reason why there's been such a dramatic improvement in our numbers. And so, of course, just kind of to round out your bio, the Gift of Hope Organ and Tissue Donor Network was formerly the Regional Organ Bank of Illinois, which we called ROBI, right?
Yes.
And then you were also a guest instructor at the University of Chicago Pritzker Medical School, the University of Illinois Medical School, the University of Illinois Public Health, correct? Yeah. And then there was also it was those three. But you've also did you also do some instructing at Chicago State or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I have to say that it's probably easier for me to say the states I've not lectured in. And there are approximately 12 states that have not taken our success record to. Here's what happened, if I may.
Hold on for a second. Hold on. And because I just want to get into, just to mention this too, because I think it also is really indicative of the trailblazer that you were, and I think still are, and the contributions that you've made to this area nationally and to our community specifically. And of course, the former Illinois governor, George Ryan, appointed you to serve as the chairman of the Illinois Department of Public Health Organ Donation Committee in 1993. Yes. And then you had that role until 2003. So for 10 years, correct?
Yes. Well, it was interesting, if I may, because from that, we were able to gather something that has proven to be impactful and not just engaging in busy work, being on a treadmill bike, doing a lot of pumping, but not going anywhere. Well, it's always my demeanor and philosophy to move the paradigm along. Mm-hmm. The opportunity of chairing that committee and seeing something that could help move the paradigm along. From that committee, what came of that, one of the key things that came of that was changing what is known now from just simply an opt-in system to where people now can sign the back of their driver's license. And that is in large part a strong commitment to their desire, that individual's desire to be an organ donor. And it is known as first person consent. Well, that process came about as a result of us taking, the committee just didn't stay stable. We went around the country and had, around the state and had conversations about what needed to be done, what were the issues surrounding the lack of participation. Because after all, we're recovering from individuals that have died. But a brain dead patient is a very unique, unfortunate way of expiring, in that it is exactly what it says, that the brain has died, but that patient is still on a ventilator, and from the shoulders down, for a good period of time, we can manage body functions as long as the heart is beating. And we can implement the utilization of certain medications to make the heartbeat harder, put them on a breathing machine. And even though the brain has died, we can keep that person going sometimes for several days.
Okay, so I tell you what, let's take a break, and then when we come back, we can talk about that some more. But also, I definitely want to get into the concerns that you raised about initially we're not in the room, and what was done in order to get us in the room, so our voices and concerns were heard. So we'll be right back. Hi, I'm your host, Dr. Balin A. Durr, and joining me today is my guest, Jack Lynch. Jack is joining me today so that we are discussing the challenges of human organ donation. And Jack is the retired senior advisor of the Gift of Hope Organ Donation Network.
Yeah.
So before the break, we were talking about the fact that part of the difficulty is that there were things that were consideration for African American folks, for Hispanic folks. And the problem was that we weren't in the room for our voices to be heard. And that was a major concern for you, and definitely drove your involvement. So I'm curious to hear, so what kind of things changes that you make or implement so you could get us into the room and our voices and concerns be heard?
Oh, wow. That's an interesting question. I think
Well, you're an interesting man, Jack.
I think some of the things that we did, you might want to register them as atypical, because I didn't ask. I just made sure I was there.
Okay.
I didn't wait on invites. If they were going to, when there were discussions surrounding policy and procedures, I didn't want to be briefed on it. I wanted to develop them. And so I simply felt that you didn't have to invite me, but I'm here and I'm going to be heard. And more important than that, I know, and you know, there's a playbook for the angry Black person, male or female. I didn't play into that. I wasn't trying to be your friend. And I was going to be prepared when I showed up. But as important as that, because then, all they can do then is just excuse you. But I was very, very successful. And that was, if you will, not something I think they were very used to. They had no idea that here it is in the state of Illinois, where 1 out of 4 Black families in 1985 that were approached said no. And then by 1992, 3 out of 4 Black families were saying yes to donation. What the heck was going on? And not only that, we are, in fact, the third largest organ procurement agency in the country. So what was it that they had? So I didn't demand a seat at the table. You know how you can walk into an after five gathering and see a group of people and go join the group?
Mhm.
So when I walk in, I am that one they want to join. They want to hear from me.
So let me say this too also, because I think that it may be something, especially someone that doesn't know you. Um, you know, I've known you really now for what 43 years,
Yes.
and the other thing too about you is that you were a pharmacist,
Mhm.
and you had a pharmacy in the community,
Right.
and in addition to your connection to the community and your commitment to the community, the other thing too about you, frankly, is that I'm going to say you're an expert, I think, at connecting with people, forming rapport and relationship with people. I think one thing folks, they, in terms of, there's your use of humor and how you control, and just, I think some people we would just call it charisma. That way that you have with people is very charismatic. So I think that, and then obviously there is the your drive and your commitment to make it happen and to get it done.
So along those lines, and thank you for that. But along those lines, I guess I was hearing things as I crisscrossed the country, uh, demonstrating how I thought it needed to be done, which went in total contrast to what they were proposing. But how is somebody going to tell me about what's the effective way to talk to other Black folks? Never, ever, other than talking at them, you would never ever hear. So I just somewhat, if you will, resented the scenario of being the first. That just always didn't rub me correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Cause you to chafe, huh?
well, I don't know about chase. I probably would use a different phrase. But what it caused me was that's just not right. I'm
Uh-huh.
not necessarily impressed with being the first. I wanted to be the best. I wanted to not be the best African American. I wanted to be the best in the country.
Absolutely.
And that was so easy, if you will, doctor, to achieve. Yes, it took consistency. Yes, it had a lot to do with drive and zeal and all of that. But what I came to realize and respect is that God didn't make any junk in me either. So I did my homework. I didn't just show up as this guy. I did my homework.
What I'm gonna say is say that one more time for the folks at the back of the church who just came in.
I just I refuse simply to be the first Black person to do this or to be involved in medicine at this level.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and
You said because God didn't make no junk.
He didn't make any junk in us.
Yes.
Stop going to the side door and the back door simply because someone told you egress and digress from out one of those two doors. I'm a front door person. You ain't gotta like me, but you will not disrespect me, and I take it.
Yeah.
And I think it wasn't a new phenomenon, but it's as that group that was from Chicago. Well, they were based here in Chicago, the Staple Singers. You probably remember them.
Of course.
Well,
Mavis
they
and
had
Pop Staples. Of course.
yeah, they had a song out entitled "Respect Yourself."
Yes.
That's who I am, and I would I had a group of what I called my advisors, Reverend Jesse Jackson, Reverend Wilfred Daniels, Judge R. Eugene Pincham. These were people that I would just turn to on a weekly basis, a monthly basis, and say, but I can't keep doing it. Every time I turn around, it's not the work, but it's the bureaucracy. And I was sitting with Reverend Jesse Jackson once, and I was just at my wit's end as to why the establishment was not rallying around what we were doing. And I said, Reverend, the country's most successful organ donor registration drive was done right here in Chicago, Illinois, at the House of Hope. We registered nearly 4,000 people in 2 hours. That's not been done anywhere in the country. Anywhere else in the country, they're talking about 50, 60 people doing a donor drive. Nearly 4,000. And when I got back to the office, it was the critique meant to go through. Forget trying to impress you. You need to try to keep up with me. So I say that to say, I said, Reverend Jackson, I think I'm going to bail out and go back to pharmacy. And, I'm sick of fighting it. Yeah. And he said, and Reverend Jackson calls me Dr. Frankenstein. Yeah. And he said to me during one of my venting sessions, he said, once again, tell me what they're doing. And I talked about it. I said, I take 4 steps forward with the program, and they try to drag me 10 steps back. He says, so that means they are behind you if they're pulling you back. He said, keep them behind you. Run on in the affirmative. Keep doing God's will. And I walked out.
I just want to say this. Although the thing that reminds me of is Reverend Dr. Joseph Lowry saying that if you don't know where you've been, you won't recognize it when folks are trying to take you back.
That's right. That I concur. I believe that. So I think Dr. Lowry's comments are in keeping with the philosophy that I developed. And the philosophy is that you will not make decisions about us without us, and then engrave that in stone, if you will. A
tombstone, more like it, but go ahead.
Well, tombstone, stone that's going to be heavy and difficult. So, I just evolved to be a voice that was not going to go away. And I was not going to function simply in a vernacular that you were comfortable with. Because one of the things, as I heard from Judge R. Eugene Pincham to say, is that you are changing the end of the narrative, but all the things they're saying to you, to whatever extent that they may be true, what I'm not hearing is that they're not talking about the fact that you're extremely successful. They were not engaging in the level of success that we were putting forth. It was all about critiquement of me. Well, I think if you wait on adversity, it will catch up with you. And so you asked earlier on, what were some of the things we did? Well, I got my MD, PhD, MOUSE degrees sitting in the waiting room of the old Cook County Hospital. A Friday night in the summer after 11 o'clock. And I would watch the trauma cases run in where gunshot wounds to the head. And then within 2 hours, I would watch those families. You could pick that family that was coming in that had been notified. And you would watch that family go up to the receptionist, inquire about the patient, being told to go sit down. And I would watch and observe all of that. Then I would watch 2 hours later, here comes the attending out. And it would go something like this. Hi, I'm Dr. Lynch. As you know, your son has suffered gunshot wounds ×2 to the head. He's had midline shift. He hasn't herniated. I expect him to herniate sometime during the course of the. Once he herniated, we're supporting with some pressure. Keep his urine output over 100. keep his urine output over 100 cc's an hour, blood pressure over 100. I understand that you don't understand, but did you have any questions? And then migrate back through those sliding doors. And because no one in that family unit wanted to seem stupid, they didn't ask any questions. But as soon as the physician and nurses left, I would watch those families break into 100 questions that they didn't have the answers to.
Yeah, I was going to say, because you know, as you well know, here in Chicago, we call it the Saturday Night Knife and Gun Club.
Right.
And, so in addition to dealing with the trauma of their loved one, you know, being shot in the head and suffering brain trauma, suffering a traumatic brain injury, now you've got to deal with the trauma of a somewhat unresponsive and incompassionate care that's being provided to them, where they don't even have an opportunity to ask informed questions because they haven't been spoken to in a way that informs them of what's really going on at a level in which, you know, just your average everyday person can understand. You know, as a medical doctor, I understood what you just said to me, but the average person on the street's not going to understand that.
I watched this happen time and time again. So I formulated not a list of things to do. Doctor, what I formulated was a list of and it was a small list of the things not to do. Totally different. And I took my findings.
Wait a minute, but to your point, can be as equally as important.
Yeah.
Right. Some things not to do can be equally as important.
Don't make an assumption that a family is not cerebral enough to understand you if you talk simple English.
Right.
Don't make an assumption that, well, they are from a zip code in Chicago where the mean income isn't $17,000 a year for 6 people living in some form of public housing. Don't make an assumption that they're going to say no to the option of permitting organs to be recovered. You set yourself up for failure. And what I began to see with these families is that their way of dealing with the grief may have been a strange nuance on the you, but very understood back where I'm from. So I put together the not to do things, and I would ask leading questions that you couldn't say yes or no to, that invited you into the questions, that invited you into the scenario. And doctor, I will tell you without apology, it works. Making those that you've declared nothing but problematic, making them a big part of the solution, it works. And I started taking my argument around the country. I started training individuals. I started doing the assessment of the individual in California, Texas, Wyoming, of all places, of the individuals that they hire to do what I do. I started being part of the hiring process because black ain't simply black, brown ain't simply brown. I know black folks that I definitely wouldn't want, but I also know that unfortunately, so many whites are going to come in there and not see from a cultural perspective that it's okay to say, you know, I really don't know the answer to that, but always be
because so to your point, like you said, the average, nobody wants to feel like they're stupid. And a number of years ago, I actually had the experience when I went to see a specialist, and it was someone, again, it was outside of, you know, what I do on a day-to-day basis, is very highly specialized. And therefore, when he said some things, of course, I had to go, wait a minute, hold up. One, slow down. And two, had to ask him some clarifying questions.
Sure.
And of course, what that said to me is even as a physician, if I'm having this experience.
What about regular Joe Blow?
Exactly. So it of course helped me make some shifts too, in regard to, you know, simplifying how am I having the conversation. But again, what I was seeing him for was not something that was life threatening or something that was life altering, like a traumatic brain injury, and essentially, my loved one who's brain dead, and potentially now having the conversation about, donating the organs. So again, you compile injury by leaving them in a place of confusion and not being informed.
And then you go back through the swinging doors and you blame them, or you say, "See, I told you." And now you've got a formulation of thoughts about, by law, I have to speak with them, but I'm not confident they're going to say yes. So let me just hurry up and get this done. And I don't label that anything other than you not being culturally sensitive. So when I would walk into the boardroom, policies are going to be developed in the boardroom. I made sure I was there,
Mm-hmm.
and that here's where I differ, not simply to be heard, but to be dealt with. To me, that was totally different. And they would start the conversation, not necessarily to say in a condescending manner, but one that was limiting. And I would simply say something crass like, "We're just not going to talk at that level. Here's what we're going to talk. Come on up here."
Mm-hmm.
And I would dictate what we're going to talk. And after a while, rather than me going back to take Xanax, let them go back.
I'm sure in some respect you were certain people's worst nightmare, which was
Everybody across the bear.
huh?
But everybody has a cross to bear. If that turns to be the case, then so be it. Here's what I knew. I knew that there were literally thousands of people disproportionately that looked like the two of us, waiting on that phone call to receive their transplant. My adversaries, they were not in the top three things that I gave a rat's glutinous minimus about. I was concerned about those volume of people, black, brown, white, and purple, that needed transplants. And I had, unlike virtually anyone else initially, stumbled into how to best cause that effect to happen. And I wasn't going to let anybody get me off my perch. It wasn't happening. It was not going to happen. I'll go back to my initial
Second. So hold on for a second. So I did
initial statement. God didn't put any junk in me either. I'm able to make my subject and verb agree in a sentence.
Anyway, a minute, your past participles and your adverbs and your
I can structure a conversation.
all of that, and that's why I actually said that in some respects, I'm sure you are some people's worst nightmare, which
So what is that?
you are. Wait a second, because you are an educated, assertive, ain't gonna take no BS off of folks, and you not going along for the ride. You gonna dictate the ride and the route, and so for an African American man, right? So like I said, an assertive, educated, informed, driven African American man. That's for some folks going to be their worst nightmare.
I would have been okay with them if I had been that get in and fit in.
Oh, of course.
I would have been fine if I kind of chuckled at their slights. I would have been fine with them if I had not planned to only be successful and to just do God's will. I would have been just fine with it. But what I think I represent is something that is offensive, and that is a black man with a made-up mind.
Well, yes, and not only that, and I left this part out too, was also an African American man with again, I said assertive, educated, informed, determined to serve something greater than yourself.
Oh yeah,
You serve your people and the community. So I tell you what, let's take another quick break. Heaven abounds in you, enlightens, uplifts, inspires, and invites you to live a life that's engaged, joyous, and limitless, the sweet spot of life. Take this journey in oneness. We are and have all that God, the infinite creative source of the universe, is. You are infinite potentiality, and the kingdom of heaven is within you. Heaven abounds in you. Hi, Dr. Valen A. Durr here with my guest, Jack Lynch, the retired senior advisor of Gift of Hope Organ Donation Network. And again, we're talking about navigating the challenges of human organ donation. And before the break, we were talking about some of the challenges of being, people of color, African American, Latinos, being left out the room, and how you assertively, were our voice and advocate for making sure that those things that matter to us, that our voice is in the room and that our concerns were addressed. So specifically, again, what are some things, you were talking about things not to do. So what are the things not to do? What are the things that families should do?
So I think a family should not permit themselves to be talked at. Just getting information and not able to process and absorb that quote unquote information. There's no question that's too juvenile. In fact, that's probably the better question to ask, because potentially everyone sitting around you wanted the answer to that same question, but were too embarrassed or challenged, if you will, to ask that question. So I encourage people with open-ended questions. After I hear the attending go through their presentation with the family, I'll walk right in, right behind him or her, and say, what did you understand about what he just said? And families will say, I have no idea. He just said he'll talk to us in the morning. That's what they took. And I would ask permission to be very blunt but honest about where we truly are. And you know as well as I do that, for the most part, African American families are going to say, yeah, just tell us the truth. Don't BS. And I would remind families right at that moment, okay, now, if you want me to be crystal clear with you and tell you from a clinical standpoint what's going on, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Is that okay with everyone? And, folks will join in. Now they're part of the conversation. Yeah. And I would say, okay, ask questions. Is he going to make it? No. But remember, you told me to tell you the truth. Well, why isn't he going to make it? And then I would just, in a simplistic way, if you will, say from the neck down, his body is still functioning. You saw that blue tube going into his mouth, hooked to that machine on the side of the bed. That machine is simply a pump, breathing for him. His heart is still beating, but from the shoulders up, his brain, his body has ceased to function. And if you don't believe me, answer me this. Which one of you here can hold your breath more than 4 minutes? Well, he's been without getting blood that carries oxygen to his brain for hours. And in his case, several days. So if no blood is getting to the brain and oxygen is found in the brain, and if the brain goes without blood and oxygen, it will die. That's what has happened. Oh, I understand. But it's not given to those families. And I'm not speaking simply in a juvenile manner, but in a vernacular in which they can attach themselves and say, oh, I get it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you pull that tube out of his mouth, then he'll still stop breathing. Eventually, yes, within a few minutes.
Yeah.
That means he's dead. Well, in a manner, that's what you were told earlier, but not in a manner that you accepted it. And so my numbers in terms of getting consent, doctor, they just continue to rise. I was getting more visibility with programs such as this,
Mm-hmm.
Ebony Magazine, Jet Magazine. I was not taking it just being articulate and skilled in front of a family. I was taking the argument to the community. And that was problematic because that's not the way they saw this going.
Yeah, and doing what we actually in medicine call doing informed consent, meaning actually explaining this is what's happening and this is why his body can't live off of a machine except for a short period of time. And this is what you can expect. Like you said, is he going to live or not? No, this is why. And so now they can at least understand what's going on and saying again, while it's a very difficult decision, at least make a decision that they understand to some level.
That caused me all kinds of rifts. It caused me all kinds of problems. Because it's an excited moment when a family's being told this kind of information. Mm-hmm. And you know as well as I know, when we go to the hospital in such a situation, we go in a group. It's out of us.
Yeah.
And 4 doors down becomes an aunt. And so you got to be careful about, I just want to talk to the husband or I just want to talk to the wife. That may not be the gatekeeper in the family. And I began.
So now you got to deal with the village.
Yeah.
You got to deal with the village.
I began to see that just what you just said was the norm. And I could see based on the structure of how people were sitting in the room, it was easy for me to tell who the person I needed to really get this message to. Mm-hmm. It had to be the next of kin. And having said that, and then perfected, caused me all kinds of problems. They would say, well, Jack's not a clinician, and we are PAs, we are intensive care nurses. So what I did was go back again and get my MD, PhD, MOUSE by beginning to make rounds on the trauma program at Cook County Hospital.
Okay.
I went through 6 months in my time just being there at 4:00 in the morning when rounds were being done, patients were being assessed, and on the invite of the chairman of the department. I would spend all of my time at Methodist Hospital over in Gary working the emergency room. Mm-hmm. Level 4 emergency room that operated as if it were a level 1 trauma center. So I saw everything. Mm-hmm. I participated in everything, and it drove them crazy.
So with this last minute or so, again, what's some things that specifically that families can do to improve their participation? I think to at least feel like they're making more informed decisions about organ transplant.
Here's what I know in response to that. I said it in kind of a joyful way that, when we go to the hospital, we go there in a group. And I'm guaranteeing if there are more than 5 people, at least 2 of them, from a clinical standpoint, are having some hemodynamic issues kidney-wise. Or there's not a block in the Black community where someone doesn't know someone on that block that's either on dialysis or in some way having some renal issues.
Right. And simply again, for the audience, hemodynamic issues, meaning?
They've got some clinical issues that their body isn't functioning correctly. Their activities of their organs are diminished. significantly. See, you can be hypertensive and have no symptoms at all, zero. And then think every now and then, because you took that Tylenol and treated that headache, but that headache isn't simply from your brain. That headache's being motivated by the fact that your kidneys are only working at 6%.
Right. So you got the increased pressure in your blood system. So there's the pressure that you're dealing with, but then there's also the fact that the organs are functioning at such a low level that they're not, in this case, removing toxins from the body. And so then the body is being affected by the kidney's diminished function. And
then you go in and your attending says, well, the reason that you're urinating a lot and you're suffering this, you're suffering that, because your pancreas has stopped working. So now you're type 2 diabetic. And they want to start you on meds that cause you even more problems, metformin or insulin. Obviously, I don't work for those companies. So what I'm saying and what I've done, along with others around the country, is that I've taken the dilemma to the Black community and say, if you don't get involved in solving it, then you can keep on talking about what white folks ain't doing. I'm talking about you and your body. And so when you appear on the programs such as Operation Push, when you appear at the National Medical Association meetings, and that you are a non-physician lecturing in the internal medicine section or in the emergency room section, in the surgery section, and your room is full of attendings hearing your message, that's what we've done different. Those are the types of things we've done different.
Okay, so obviously, again, there's been tremendous work that you've probably done in the last, 35, 40 years?
35 years, yes.
Yeah, 35 years on in terms of, organ donation and organ transplants and increasing our participation in our education. And so, of course, we owe you a huge thank you for that, and for being our voice and for being our advocate. And obviously, we didn't get to that that topic we wanted to talk about, in terms of also the difficulty that people have with maintaining the protocol in order to get organ transplants. So, you know what that means? We're gonna have to have you come back. So in the meantime, how do people connect with you?
So I'm open now to emails, and my email address, and I'll kind of ad-lib here for a moment until you get a pencil and paper. But my email address is jlynch, Lynch, 60422 @gmail.com.
So
again, jlynch, Lynch, 60422 @gmail.com, and I will respond.
So again, thank you so much for this greatly informative conversation. And again, I'll have you back.
I appreciate the opportunity. And as one of my advisors used to say to me, Judge R. Eugene Fincham, the struggle goes on.
Indeed. Indeed.
Be blessed.
And walk in your blessings as your unique, wonderful, God expressed self.
God is good.
I am your host, Dr. Balin A. Durr, awakening and empowering you to live out your infinite potential, to live life in the sweet spot. I'll see you next week. Thank you for joining us today in the sweet spot. Share, follow, and like us on social media. To learn more, please visit balinadurmd.com, spelled BALINADURMD.com. durrmd.com. Join us next week, and remember, when you heal your mind, all things are possible.